A man was found unconscious in the forest. When he woke up, the Orc Queen was in his arms. Hunger has a specific kind of logic. It whispers at first, just a gentle reminder that you haven't eaten in a while. Then it speaks louder. Then it screams. And finally, when you've ignored it long enough, it stops making sense entirely. That's when you start seeing plants you've never noticed before and thinking, maybe this one's different, maybe this one won't kill me. Rowan had reached the maybe this one stage 3 days ago. The Forbidden Forest earned its name, honestly. It wasn't called forbidden because of some ancient curse or mystical barrier. It was called forbidden because people who went in didn't come out. Simple as that. The king's law said stay out. Common sense said stay out. Every instinct Rowan had developed in 32 years of life said stay out. But hunger doesn't care about laws or sense or instincts. He'd been exiled 6 months ago. Desertion, they called it. Refusing orders, technically. The specific order had been burn the village, kill everyone inside. The village in question had been sheltering enemy wounded, Orc wounded, which made them traitors under martial law. The fact that they were also sheltering human children, human elderly, human families who just wanted to survive the war, didn't seem to matter much to Captain Vhagar. Vhagar had been his mentor once, had taught him to shoot, to track, to survive, had also taught him that orders were orders, and questioning them was the same as treason. Rowan had questioned them anyway. Now, here he was, 6 months later, staring at a flower that was probably going to kill him. It had petals the color of moonlight, silver white with an almost luminescent quality, even in daylight. Pretty, delicate, definitely poisonous. He ate it anyway. The leaves tasted bitter, like chewing on regret. The petals dissolved on his tongue with a sweetness that seemed like nature's way of apologizing for what came next. And what came next was fire spreading through his veins, his vision folding in on itself, and the forest floor rushing up to meet his face with the inevitability of a promise kept. His last conscious thought was that at least he wouldn't be hungry anymore. Death has a certain smell. Madraka knew it well, had smelled it on battlefields, in burning villages, on her own hands more times than she cared to count. It's metallic and sweet at the same time, like copper coins left in honey. But this wasn't death she was smelling. This was stupid. The human was lying face down in a patch of moon petals, which explained everything and nothing at once. Moon petals weren't food. Everyone knew that. Humans knew that. Even the dumbest orc youngling knew that. But apparently, this particular human had decided to test the theory anyway. Madraka should have kept walking. She was on her twice-weekly patrol of the border territories, a duty she took seriously despite being queen now. Or maybe because she was queen. Hard to demand respect from warriors twice your size, when they knew you spent your days sitting on a throne instead of earning your scars. The human was still breathing, shallow, rapid breaths that sounded like someone drowning in air. She nudged him with her boot. No response. Nudged harder. Still nothing. Stupid way to die, she said to no one in particular. She should have kept walking. But something about the way he was lying there, curled slightly on his side now, hands clutched against his stomach, like he could hold the poison inside if he just squeezed hard enough, reminded her of something. Or someone. Her younger brother had died like this once. Well, almost died, before she'd dragged him to a healer who'd spent 3 days forcing plant extracts down his throat until the fever broke. Her brother had been 8 years old and eating moon petals on a dare. This human was 30-something and eating them because... why? There was a leather satchel next to him. Empty. Water skin next to that. Also empty. Hunting bow nearby, unstrung. Quiver with 3 arrows. 3 arrows. That was the kind of number you ended up with when you'd been surviving on luck alone for way too long. Madraka made a decision she knew she'd regret. The cabin was 2 miles east, abandoned for a decade, probably longer. It was the kind of structure humans built when they first started colonizing the borderlands, sturdy enough to survive winters, not sturdy enough to survive orcs. Most of the border cabins were rubble now. This one had lasted because it was small, half hidden by oak trees, and unremarkable enough that no one had bothered destroying it properly. Dragging an unconscious human through 2 miles of forest was not part of Madraka's patrol duties. It was definitely not part of her queenly responsibilities, and it was absolutely the kind of thing that would get her questioned by every war chief in the clan if anyone found out. She dragged him anyway. By the time she got him inside, the sun was setting. The cabin was exactly as she remembered. 1 room, stone fireplace, wooden floor with gaps wide enough to see dirt underneath, and exactly 0 furniture. The previous occupants had either taken everything or someone else had looted it years ago. She dropped the human in the corner farthest from the door. He hit the floor with a sound like a sack of potatoes, which was approximately how much consciousness he was showing. The fever was getting worse. She could see it in the flush spreading across his face, the sweat beading despite the cold. Moon petal poisoning didn't kill quickly. It killed slowly, burning you from inside out over 12 to 15 hours. If you survived the first night, you'd probably survive entirely. Most people didn't survive the first night. Madraka built a fire, not because she particularly cared if the human lived or died at this point, but because she wasn't planning on freezing to death herself. The temperature was already dropping. Winter in the Forbidden Forest didn't ask permission. It just showed up and made itself at home in your bones. She sat against the wall opposite the human, watching the fire throw shadows across the empty room. This was the point where she should leave. Mission accomplished. He had shelter and fire. Whether he survived was now between him and whatever gods humans prayed to. But leaving meant 2 miles of night forest between here and home, and night forest in winter was the kind of place where even orc queens sometimes didn't come back. The smart move was to wait until morning. The problem with waiting until morning was that the temperature kept dropping. Fire only does so much. It heats the air around it, sure, but air moves. Air escapes through gaps in walls, through the chimney, through every crack and crevice in a decade-old abandoned cabin. Air doesn't trap heat, doesn't hold it close, doesn't keep you alive when winter decides it's done being polite. Bodies, though. Bodies trap heat just fine. Madraka watched the human's breathing get shallower, watched the shivers that had started an hour ago get worse, watched his lips turn from pink to blue to something closer to grey. He was going to die, not from the poison. The fever had peaked and was starting to break, but from the cold, from exposure, from nature's final joke. Surviving the poison just to freeze to death 6 feet from a fire. She could let it happen, would be cleaner that way, easier to explain. Found a human dying in the forest, gave him shelter, wasn't enough. Clean, simple, true, but not the truth she wanted to live with. Madraka stood up, walked across the room, and lay down next to him. The cold hit her immediately. He was freezing, not metaphorically, literally. Ice-cold skin, muscles locked rigid from shivers, breath coming in short gasps that fogged in the air despite the fire 8 feet away. She wrapped her arms around him and pulled him against her chest. Heat transfer is a science. Orcs run warmer than humans, something about muscle density and metabolism. She'd always been told it was what made orcs better warriors. Right now, it just made her a very expensive blanket. His shivers gradually calmed, his breathing evened out. The grey colour faded from his lips. And Madraka, queen of the Blood Peak clan, first female chieftain in 2 centuries, holder of 7 battle scars and 0 tolerance for weakness, lay on a freezing cabin floor holding an enemy she should have killed and wondered what exactly she was doing with her life. The fire crackled, wind howled outside, and somewhere in the space between midnight and dawn, she fell asleep. Rowan woke to 3 distinct sensations: warmth, pain, and the absolute certainty that something was very wrong with his current situation. The warmth was coming from behind him. The pain was coming from everywhere, specifically his stomach, which felt like someone had spent the night using it as an anvil. And the wrongness was coming from the fact that the warmth behind him was breathing, had arms wrapped around him, and was distinctly not human-shaped. He opened his eyes slowly. Dawn light was filtering through gaps in walls he didn't recognize. He was in a cabin he'd never seen before, and wrapped around him, still asleep, was an orc. Not just any orc. He knew who she was. Everyone did. Madraka, queen of the Bloodpeak clan, the orc who'd won her throne 3 years ago by challenging her father's murderer to single combat and winning, the orc who'd led her warriors through 4 major battles in 2 years and hadn't lost once. The orc who was, according to every human military report, ruthless, strategic, and absolutely not the type to save dying enemies and cuddle them through the night. And yet, her arm was draped across his chest, her breath was warm against the back of his neck, and if he moved even slightly, she was going to wake up and probably kill him for, what? Existing? Being held by her while unconscious? He hadn't exactly had much choice in the matter. He held very still. Minutes passed, the sun climbed higher, and eventually, inevitably, she stirred. The moment she realized what position they were in was obvious. Her entire body went rigid, then her arm retracted from his chest with the speed of someone who'd just discovered they were hugging a wasp nest. Rowan sat up carefully, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening, turned to face her. They stared at each other. In his 32 years, Rowan had seen orcs exactly 4 times before this, twice at a distance during battles he'd barely survived. Once close enough to fight, which had ended with him bleeding and running. And once very, very close, the orc whose life he'd refused to take, which had led directly to his exile. Every time they'd been wearing armor, carrying weapons. Covered in war paint and blood, and the kind of violence that made you forget they were people underneath all of it. Madraka was wearing a leather vest, simple trousers, and had exactly 0 weapons visible. Her green skin had scars, a long one across her left shoulder, smaller ones on her knuckles and forearms, but no war paint. Her hair was dark, long, and currently falling across her face in a way that made her look less like a legendary warrior queen and more like someone who'd just had a very confusing night. "You're alive," she said finally. "Apparently," Rowan managed. "You ate moon petals." "I was hungry." "Moon petals aren't food." I noticed. Silence stretched between them like a thread pulled too tight. "Why?" Rowan asked. "Why what? Why am I alive? You could have left me, should have left me." Madraka stood up, brushing dirt from her clothes. "Don't read too much into it. I needed shelter anyway. You just happened to be here. That doesn't explain the—" He gestured vaguely at where they'd been lying. "You were freezing. I was warm. Winter doesn't care about politics." She walked to the door, looked out at the morning forest. "You should leave. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of." "I'm exiled. There's no going back." She turned to look at him. "Exiled for what?" "Refusing to burn a village full of civilians. Orders are orders, apparently." I disagreed. Something flickered in her expression. "The village at Cross Creek? You know about it? The wounded orcs sheltered there were mine, my warriors." She was quiet for a moment. "They died anyway. Different human patrol, less squeamish captain." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. You didn't kill them. You just lost your life trying to save them." She turned back to the door. "We're not so different, you and I. How do you figure? We both made choices that made our people hate us. You're exiled. I'm a queen who half my warriors want to overthrow because I'm not violent enough for their taste." She laughed, and it wasn't a happy sound. "We're both monsters to someone." Rowan stood up slowly. His legs were shaky but functional. "So what now?" "Now you leave. I leave. We forget this happened." "Will you? Forget this happened?" Madraka didn't answer, just stepped out into the morning and disappeared into the trees. 3 days later, Rowan was still thinking about green skin, dark hair, and the warmth of someone who should have been his enemy. The thing about exile is that it gives you a lot of time to think, too much time. Time to question every decision you've ever made. Time to wonder if you did the right thing or just the thing that felt right at the moment. Time to realize that the right thing and the thing that keeps you alive are often 2 completely different choices. He'd made camp in a small cave 1/2 mile from where the moon petal incident had happened. It was defensible, dry, and had enough fish in the nearby stream that starvation was no longer his primary concern. primary concern was now figuring out what the hell had happened in that cabin. Enemies didn't save each other. That was basic war logic. You killed your enemy, or you let them die, or you captured them for information or ransom. You didn't drag them 2 miles to shelter, keep them warm through the night, and then act like it was no big deal in the morning. And you definitely didn't lie awake at night, remembering exactly how it felt. He was still thinking about this when she showed up again. Rowan heard her coming before he saw her, footsteps that weren't trying particularly hard to be quiet. She emerged from the tree line like she'd done this walk 100 times, which was concerning for a lot of reasons. "You're still here," Madraka said. "Didn't have anywhere else to be. The forest is a bad place for humans. It's a bad place for everyone. That's why it's forbidden." She sat down on a fallen log near his campfire, uninvited but not unwelcome. The evening sun caught her face at an angle that made the scars on her shoulder visible, old wounds from old battles. "Why are you here?" Rowan asked. "Patrol route. Your patrol route brings you past my camp. Twice a week, apparently." They sat in silence for a while. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called out and got no answer. "Can I ask you something?" Rowan said. "You can ask. I might not answer. Why did you really save me? The truth." Madraka was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower, more careful. "My brother almost died eating moon petals when he was 8. Dare from older warriors. I found him, dragged him to a healer, sat with him for 3 days while the fever broke." She paused. "He survived, grew up. Died 2 years ago in battle against humans. One of your archers put an arrow through his throat at 50 yards. Clean shot, professional." "I'm sorry, don't be. He died a warrior. That's what he wanted." She looked at Rowan. "But when I saw you lying there, same poison, same stupid peaceful expression like dying, was just another kind of sleep. I couldn't leave you. Made no sense. Still doesn't. But I couldn't. Makes sense to me. How? Because you're not a monster. Neither am I. And maybe that's the problem with this whole damn war." She smiled, and it was the first real smile he'd seen from her. "The war chiefs would have my head if they heard that. Good thing I won't tell them." She visited twice more that week, then 3 times the next week. Each time staying a little longer, each conversation going a little deeper. They talked about everything and nothing. About growing up in worlds that hated each other, about losing family to wars neither of them had started, about the weight of making decisions that determined whether people lived or died, about how exhausting it was to be strong all the time when what you really wanted was to just rest. "Do you ever regret it?" Rowan asked during one visit. "Taking the throne?" "Every day," Madraka said without hesitation. "Being queen means everyone watches everything you do. Every decision I make gets questioned. Every time I choose mercy over violence, half my clan thinks I'm weak. Every time I choose violence, I hate myself a little more. So why keep doing it? Because someone has to. And if I step down, the chiefs will put someone in charge who thinks war is the answer to everything." She looked at him. "What about you? Ever regret refusing those orders?" "Not once," Rowan said. "I might have lost everything, but I kept the one thing that mattered. I can still look at myself without flinching. That's rare. So is an Orc Queen who thinks war is bad strategy. I never said war was bad strategy. I said endless war was bad strategy. There's a difference." She stood up, preparing to leave like she always did when the conversations got too comfortable. "War has a purpose. It ends things, forces resolution. But this war between your people and mine, it's just murder in circles. No one wins, everyone loses. So why not stop? Because I'm one queen in a world of warriors who think peace is weakness, and you're one exiled human in a forest. Neither of us has the power to stop anything." She left before he could argue, but she kept coming back. It was during the 5th week that everything changed. Rowan had caught a deer, actual meat, for the first time in months. He was in the middle of field dressing it when Madraka appeared earlier than usual. "You hunt well," she observed. "Former royal huntsman. It's literally the one skill I have." You could teach others. My people could always use better hunters. Your people would kill me on sight. Not if I vouched for you. He looked up at her, knife still in hand. You're not serious. Why not? You're good at something we need. You have no loyalty to any human kingdom, and you've already proven you'd rather starve than hurt civilians. She sat down across from him. We could use someone like you. Your warriors would never accept it. A human in an orc clan? They'd hate it, which is exactly why I want to do it. She smiled. Nothing shakes up rigid thinking like forcing people to confront their assumptions. You want to use me as a political statement. I want to use you as proof that enemies can become allies if both sides stop being idiots long enough to try. Rowan cleaned his knife slowly. What would I have to do? Hunt, teach hunting. Show up and be human in a place where humans aren't supposed to exist. Challenge every warrior who thinks they know what humans are capable of just by looking. And if they challenge me to fight, then you fight. And if you lose, you lose. But at least you'll lose trying instead of starving alone in a cave. He thought about it, about 6 months of exile, loneliness and slow starvation. About a queen who'd saved him for no rational reason and kept coming back for even less rational ones. About the possibility that maybe, just maybe, something different could exist in a world that only seemed to know how to kill itself. When do we start? He asked. Tomorrow. I'll come at dawn, pack light. She stood to leave, then paused. Rowan, yeah? This is probably a terrible idea. Probably. We'll both likely regret it. Definitely. Good. As long as we're clear. She disappeared into the trees, and Rowan sat with his half-dressed deer thinking about terrible ideas and how the best ones usually were. The next morning, she came back as promised. They walked together through the forbidden forest toward orc territory, and with each step, Rowan felt the weight of his old life falling away and the terror of a new one taking its place. Bringing a human into orc territory was, objectively speaking, one of the stupider things Madraka had done as queen. It ranked somewhere between told the war chiefs their strategy was outdated and publicly questioned whether endless war was really the best use of resources. Both of those decisions had nearly gotten her killed. This one probably would actually get her killed. But Rowan was right about one thing. Doing the right thing and doing the thing that kept you alive were often completely different choices. The Bloodpeak clan lived in the mountain valleys north of the Forbidden Forest. Rowan's first sight of their settlement made him stop walking. It wasn't what he'd expected. Human stories about orc settlements usually involved skull decorations, blood sacrifices, and architecture that looked like organized chaos. What Rowan saw instead was a village, stone buildings with thatched roofs, smoke rising from chimneys, children, actual orc children, playing some kind of game with sticks and a leather ball, families sitting together outside their homes, working on everything from weapon maintenance to food preparation. You're staring, Madraka said. I expected something different. Skulls and blood. Sorry to disappoint. We save those for special occasions. They walked through the settlement. Every orc they passed stopped what they were doing to stare. The children stopped playing. The families stopped talking. Even the warriors, massive figures twice Rowan's size, just stared. No one attacked, no one shouted. They just watched with expressions that ranged from confusion to disgust to something that might have been curiosity. Madraka led him to the largest building, a long house with carved posts flanking the entrance. Inside was a single large room with a fire pit in the center and seating arranged around it. A dozen orcs were already there, clearly waiting. War chiefs. Rowan recognized the type immediately. Same energy as human military commanders. Confident, scarred, and absolutely convinced they knew better than everyone else. You brought a human to council, one of them said. Krugo, Madraka had called him. 7 feet tall, arms thick as tree trunks, and a voice like gravel in a barrel. I did, Madraka said simply. Why? Because I'm queen, and I decided to. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. She gestured for Rowan to sit. He did, very aware that he was the smallest, weakest, most killable person in the room by a significant margin. This human was exiled from his kingdom for refusing to kill civilians, Madraka continued. He's a skilled hunter and tracker. He has no loyalty to any human nation, and I've vouched for him. You've vouched for Prey, another war chief said. Older, female, scars covering half her face. Humans aren't warriors. They're weak, cowardly, and treacherous. He refused orders that would have saved his career because they violated his principles, Madraka countered. That's not cowardly. That's the opposite of cowardly. One exception doesn't change the rule. Maybe the rule is the exception. Maybe we've spent so long hating humans that we forgot to check if our hatred still makes sense. That caused an uproar. Multiple chiefs spoke at once, voices overlapping in a cacophony of anger, disbelief, and insults that Rowan didn't need translated to understand. Madraka let it go on for exactly 30 seconds before standing up and slamming her fist on the wooden table hard enough to crack it. Silence fell. "You want to challenge my decision?" she said quietly. "Fine. Challenge accepted. Any warrior who thinks they know better can face me in circle. Winner decides what happens to the human." No one moved. "That's what I thought," Madraka said. "The human stays. He hunts, he teaches, and every single one of you will treat him with the same respect you'd show any clan member, or you'll explain to me personally why my direct order isn't worth following." She sat down. The meeting continued, but Rowan barely heard it. He was too busy trying to process the fact that an Orc queen had just threatened her own war chiefs on behalf of someone she'd met 6 weeks ago. After the council ended, she found him outside. "That went well," Rowan said. "That went terribly. But they'll tolerate you now, which is all we need." "Why are you doing this? Really?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Because 5 weeks ago, I held you while you were dying, and somewhere between midnight and dawn, I stopped seeing an enemy and started seeing a person. And I can't unsee that. And if I can't unsee it with you, maybe others can't unsee it either. Maybe that's how we start fixing this whole mess. Or maybe we both get killed for trying. Also possible." She smiled. "But at least it'll be interesting." The next 3 months were the hardest of Rowan's life. Learning to exist in an Orc clan as the only human required rewriting everything he thought he knew about survival. It wasn't the physical challenges. He was a skilled hunter, and his tracking abilities earned respect faster than he'd expected. It was the social challenges. Orcs didn't do subtle. If they liked you, they showed it. If they hated you, they showed that too. There was no polite pretending, no social niceties, no careful diplomatic language. Just blunt, direct communication that left no room for misunderstanding. Most of them hated him at first. Krugo, the war chief, made his opinion clear daily. Would accidentally shoulder-check Rowan hard enough to knock him down. Would question his hunts, his methods, his existence. Would loudly wonder how long it would take for the weakling human to run back to his own kind. Rowan took it, partly because fighting back would prove nothing, mostly because Krugo was literally twice his size and could probably snap him in half without much effort. But gradually, slowly, things shifted. The day Rowan tracked a winter elk for 6 hours and brought it back to the clan, 3 warriors who'd never spoken to him before nodded in acknowledgement. The day he taught a group of younger orcs how to set snares that didn't require brute strength, one of them actually thanked him. The day he successfully hunted alongside a full orc war party and kept pace for 8 miles through rough terrain, Krugo stopped sneering and started ignoring him instead. Progress, apparently, came in small increments. Through it all, Madraka was there. Not constantly. She had a clan to run, but regularly enough that Rowan always knew she was watching, ensuring no one crossed the line from hostility to violence. They fell into a pattern. She'd find him after council meetings, or during evening meals, or sometimes just late at night when the settlement was quiet. They'd talk about clan politics, about human kingdoms, about the war that neither of them wanted, but neither could stop, about the small moments that made survival worth it, a good hunt, a child's laugh, the first snow of winter melting on your face. "Do you regret it?" Rowan asked her one night. They were sitting on the edge of the settlement, looking out at the forest below. "Bringing me here? Ask me again in 6 months," Madraka said. "That bad? Half my war chiefs think you're a spy. The other half think I'm losing my mind. A few of them are planning to challenge my leadership in the spring. Because of me. Because of everything. You're just the most visible symptom of a queen who thinks peace is better than glory." She was quiet for a moment. "Krugo asked me yesterday why I don't just kill you and end the controversy. What did you say?" "I told him that killing someone to make other people comfortable was exactly the kind of thinking that keeps this war going." She looked at Rowan. "Then I told him if he had a problem with my leadership, he was welcome to challenge me in circle." "What did he say?" "Nothing, because he knows I'd win. But he's not wrong that I'm making everything harder for myself by keeping you alive. So why do it?" She didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched long enough that Rowan thought she might not answer at all. Finally, "Because when I held you that night, I made a choice, and I don't unmake choices just because they get difficult." She stood up. "Also, because you're the only person in this clan I can talk to who doesn't want something from me. Everyone else wants me to be more violent, more aggressive, more like a traditional war chief. You just let me be tired sometimes." "Is that allowed? Queens being tired?" "It's frowned upon." She smiled slightly. "But I'm doing it anyway." She left, and Rowan sat alone wondering what it meant that an orc queen had just told him he made her life harder and better in the same conversation. Winter deepened. The clan prepared for the hardest months, stockpiling food, reinforcing shelters, training warriors for potential raids. Rowan threw himself into hunting with an intensity that surprised even him, partly to prove his worth, partly because staying busy meant not thinking about how complicated his life had become. Nell, the human healer who'd somehow ended up living with the clan decades ago, started talking to him, which mostly meant she talked at him while sorting herbs, holding one-sided conversations with plants that apparently had names and personalities. "Basil's being stubborn today," she'd say. "Won't dry properly. I told him, Basil, if you don't cooperate, someone's going to die of infection and it'll be your fault." But does he listen? No. Rowan learned to just nod and let her monologue continue. Vrokosh, the young scout who collected human artifacts, started showing Rowan his collection. Buttons, fragments of cloth, broken tools, pieces of pottery. Things that had meaning only because Vrokosh had decided they did. "This button," Vrokosh explained, holding up something small and wooden, "came from a battlefield 3 years ago. I found it in the grass next to a dead human soldier. He was young, maybe 20 winters, and I thought he chose this button specifically, sewed it on his jacket himself probably. This button mattered to him." He looked at Rowan. "Does that sound stupid?" "No," Rowan said honestly. "It sounds like you understand something most people forget." "What's that?" "That every person we kill is someone who cared about buttons." Vrokosh nodded slowly, then carefully placed the button back in his collection. Small moments, small connections, small evidence that maybe enemies could become something else if given time and proximity. Then Vhagar showed up. Rowan was returning from a hunt when he saw the commotion. A group of human soldiers at the settlement boundary, not attacking, just standing there, weapons visible but not drawn. A parley, technically, and at the front of the group, unmistakable even at a distance, was Captain Vhagar. His former mentor, his former commander, the man who declared him a deserter and exiled him for refusing orders. Madraka was already there, warriors flanking her. The two groups faced each other across 50 feet of neutral ground, and Rowan could feel the tension from 100 yards away. He should have run, should have hidden, should have done anything except walk directly toward the confrontation. He walked toward the confrontation. "Rowan," Vhagar called out as he approached, "I hoped we'd find you here." "Captain, still using my rank, old habits." Vhagar's eyes swept over him. "You look well. Better than expected for a deserter living with orcs. What do you want?" "To talk, just talk." Vhagar gestured to his men. "No violence. I came under truce flag. The Orc Queen accepted." Madraka's expression said she'd accepted under protest, but she nodded confirmation. "Why?" Rowan asked. Because the kingdom wants to make you an offer. That was unexpected. What kind of offer? Come back, full pardon, reinstatement as royal huntsman, all charges dropped. Vega stepped closer. The king himself authorized it. You were right about the village. We reviewed the incident. Burning civilians was a mistake. The king acknowledges that now. Too late for the civilians. Yes, but not too late for you. Vegar's voice was earnest, and that was somehow worse than if he'd been threatening. Come home, Rowan. You don't belong here. These are orcs. They're not your people. Neither are you. Not anymore. Because we made one mistake. Because you made that mistake and then exiled me for not making it with you. Rowan felt anger rising, old and familiar. I did my job. I followed every order until you ordered me to commit murder. And when I refused, you declared me a traitor and sent me to die. I didn't send you to die. I sent you into exile. Same thing. You just let nature do the killing instead of doing it yourself. Vega was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, more careful. You're right. I was wrong. We were wrong. That's why I'm here, to fix it. You can't fix it. Those people are still dead. I'm still... Rowan stopped, was going to say, I'm still exiled, but that wasn't quite true anymore. He was living with orcs, learning from orcs, being accepted by orcs more than he'd ever been accepted by his own kind. You're still what? Vagar prompted. Different. I'm different. I've seen things here that humans aren't supposed to see. Learned things we're not supposed to know. These people aren't monsters. They're just people who've been at war so long, they've forgotten how to be anything else. They're orcs. So they're the enemy. That's how war works. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe war shouldn't work like that. Vega looked past Rowan to where Madraka stood, watching silently. She's gotten to you. She saved my life. Then she let me stay when every warrior in her clan wanted me dead. Then she proved that enemies can become allies if both sides stop being idiots long enough to try. And what happens when the war starts again? When her warriors attack our villages? When orders come down that can't be refused? Whose side will you be on? Rowan didn't have an answer for that, because Vygar was right. The peace was temporary at best. Eventually someone would attack someone. Retribution would be demanded. The cycle would continue. I can't go back, Rowan said finally. Even if I wanted to, even if you pardoned me, I can't unsee what I've seen here. Then what will you do? I don't know. But I know I won't do it by pretending orcs are monsters, so I can feel better about killing them. Vagar studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I see. Then I suppose there's nothing more to say. I suppose not. For what it's worth, Rowan, I am sorry. About the exile, about everything. You were a good soldier. You would have been a great commander. I was never going to be commander. I asked too many questions. Yes, you did. Vygar turned to his men. Let's go. They left. Rowan watched them disappear into the forest, feeling like he'd just closed a door he'd never be able to reopen. Madraka approached. That was your former mentor? Yes. He wanted you back. Yes. But you said no. Yes. Why? Rowan looked at her, at the settlement behind her, at the life he'd accidentally built in enemy territory. Because going back means forgetting. And I don't want to forget. She nodded, didn't say anything more, didn't need to. But something had shifted, and Rowan felt it like a weight settling into his chest. The war chiefs made their move 2 weeks later. Rowan heard the shouting first. Deep voices raised in anger, echoing from the longhouse. He was at the edge of the settlement, preparing for a hunt, but he dropped everything and ran toward the sound. Inside the longhouse, Madraka stood in the center of the circle. Around her, 8 war chiefs, including Krugo, stood in a formation that was clearly coordinated, accusatory. You've gone too far, Krugo was saying. The human stays. The raids stop. You question every battle plan. You refuse to retaliate when humans attack our territory. This isn't leadership. This is cowardice. I'm preventing unnecessary deaths, Madraka said, voice level. That's not cowardice. That's strategy. Strategy is killing our enemies before they kill us. And where does that strategy end? When every human is dead, when every orc is dead, when there's nothing left but empty land and ghosts? It ends when we win. We're not winning, we're just dying slower than they are. Krugo stepped closer. I'm challenging your leadership. Circle combat. Tomorrow at dawn. You lose, you step down. Madraka didn't flinch. Accepted. The word hung in the air like a blade. Rowan felt ice in his stomach. Circle combat meant fight to yield or death. And while Madraka was a skilled warrior, Krugo was 7 feet of muscle and rage with 20 years of combat experience. The war chiefs filed out. Madraka stayed behind, sitting heavily on one of the benches. Rowan approached. You don't have to accept that challenge. Yes, I do. If I refuse, it means I'm weak. They'll vote me out anyway. You'll lose. She looked at him. Maybe. Maybe not. He's bigger, stronger, and angrier. I can't win through strength, I know, but I can win through strategy. She stood up. I've beaten bigger opponents before. Not in formal circle combat. Not with your entire clan watching. If I lose, they'll elect someone who'll turn the clan into a war machine, which means more death, more fighting, more of this endless cycle. She touched his shoulder briefly. But I won't lose. She said it with such certainty that Rowan almost believed her. Dawn came too fast. The entire clan gathered in the central clearing. Circle combat was tradition. A ring of warriors forming the boundary, no weapons. Fight until one opponent yielded or couldn't continue. Madraka entered the circle first. No armor, just leather bindings on her hands and determination in her eyes. Krugo entered second. He looked exactly like what he was, a war machine in orc form. Pure violence waiting to happen. They faced each other. The clan elder, an ancient orc who'd outlived 3 wars, raised his hand. Begin. Krugo charged immediately. The smart move would have been for Madraka to dodge, use speed and agility. Instead, she met him head-on. They collided with a sound like thunder. Krugo's momentum should have flattened her. Instead, she braced, absorbed the impact, and used his own force to spin him off balance. He stumbled, recovered, came at her again. The fight was brutal. Krugo landed hits that would have killed a smaller opponent. Madraka took them, gave back worse, and kept moving. He was stronger. She was faster. He was relentless. She was strategic. Minutes passed. Both were bleeding now, both breathing hard, neither yielding. Rowan watched with his heart trying to break through his ribs. Then Krugo made a mistake. Overextended on a punch, left his side exposed for half a second. Madraka took it, hit him in the ribs with everything she had. Once, twice, 3 times in the same spot. Something cracked. Krugo roared, swung wildly. Madraka ducked under it, came up inside his guard, and hit him in the throat, not hard enough to kill, but hard enough to remind him she could have. He dropped to one knee. Yield, Madraka said quietly. Krugo's face was rage and pain and humiliation mixed together. For a long moment, Rowan thought he'd refuse, thought he'd keep fighting until one of them died. Then, I yield. The circle erupted. Some warriors cheered, others looked disgusted, but all of them looked convinced. Madraka had won. She helped Krugo to his feet, an insult and a mercy at the same time. He shook her off, walked out of the circle without looking back. The elder raised his voice. The challenge is met. The queen stands. The clan dispersed slowly. Madraka stood alone in the center of the circle, bleeding from a dozen places, breathing like she'd just run 10 miles. Rowan approached. You won. Barely. Still counts. She smiled slightly. Barely counts. Also true. What happens now? Now I rule a clan where half the warriors hate me. Same as before. Just slightly fewer assassination attempts. That's progress. Tell me that after the next 3 months. They walked back toward the longhouse together. And Rowan realized that watching someone you cared about nearly die was significantly worse than nearly dying yourself. He cared about her. When exactly that had happened, he couldn't say. But it was true, and it was terrifying. And it was the absolute worst possible complication in a situation already complicated beyond reason. But it was true. 3 months passed. Spring came, and with spring came raids. Human villages along the border reported orc attacks. Orc settlements reported human retaliation. The careful peace that had held through winter shattered like ice in sunlight. Madraka tried to limit her clan's involvement, sent defensive patrols instead of offensive ones, refused to authorize raids, negotiated when possible. The war chiefs hated it, the warriors grumbled, and tensions built. Rowan found himself in an impossible position. He was living with orcs, but humans were being killed. He'd rejected his kingdom, but he couldn't reject his species. "I don't know what to do," he told Madraka one evening. They were in her private quarters, a small room in the longhouse that served as both office and living space. "Every report of human deaths feels like failure, but every orc death feels the same. I can't win this." "Neither can I," Madraka said. She was sorting through reports, her expression exhausted. "I stopped a raid last week. The warriors were furious. Krugo told me I was choosing humans over orcs. He's not entirely wrong." "What did you say?" "I said I was choosing living warriors over dead ones, that every raid costs us fighters we can't replace." She looked up. "But that's not the full truth. The full truth is, I'm choosing you." Rowan went very still. "I'm choosing you," she repeated, quieter now. "Every time I stop a raid, I'm thinking about whether you could live with me authorizing it. Every time I negotiate instead of fighting, I'm thinking about what kind of queen you'd respect. I'm not making decisions based on strategy anymore. I'm making them based on—" She stopped. "Based on what?" "On not wanting to be someone you'd hate." The words hung between them like a confession that couldn't be taken back. "I don't hate you," Rowan said. "I couldn't hate you if I tried." "You should. I'm an orc. You're human. This is impossible." "I know. I've been telling myself that for months." He moved closer. "Hasn't helped." They looked at each other. Two enemies who'd accidentally become something else. Two people from different species, different cultures, different worlds entirely. Two absolute idiots who'd somehow fallen into something neither of them wanted and both of them needed. "This is a really bad idea," Madraka said. "The worst," Rowan agreed. "It'll make everything harder. Definitely. We'll both probably die because of it." "Very likely." She kissed him anyway. It was clumsy and desperate, and tasted like terrible decisions made at exactly the right time. It was wrong in every way that mattered, and perfect in every way that didn't. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Madraka said, "We can't tell anyone." Agreed. "This doesn't change anything. Except everything." "Except everything," she confirmed. They lasted 2 weeks before someone figured it out. Vrokosh, of all people. The young scout who collected buttons noticed Rowan and Madraka standing too close during a council meeting. Noticed the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. Noticed all the small details that added up to something impossible. "You're together," he said to Rowan one afternoon. Not a question. Rowan considered lying, decided against it. "Yes." "Does she know you're together?" "She's the one I'm together with." "So yes." Vrokosh processed this. "That's very bad. I know. The war chiefs will kill you both. Probably. But you're doing it anyway?" "Apparently." "Why?" Rowan thought about it. "Because being alone was killing me anyway. At least this way I'm alive first." Vrokosh nodded slowly. "That's the most orc thing you've ever said." "Is that good?" "I have no idea." Word spread. Not from Vrokosh, he kept the secret, but secrets that big have a way of escaping. A warrior saw them talking too familiarly. A guard noticed Madraka visiting Rowan's quarters. Small details became large suspicions, became confirmed truth. The war chiefs confronted her publicly. "You're sleeping with the human," Krugo said, not a question. An accusation. Madraka didn't deny it. "My personal life is none of your concern." "It's all our concern when our queen betrays her own kind." "I haven't betrayed anyone." "You're with a human. You're—" Krugo stopped himself, but everyone knew what he was about to say. "Contaminating yourself. Polluting the bloodline. Dishonoring the clan." "I'm with someone who respects me," Madraka said quietly. "Someone who doesn't question my every decision or challenge my authority daily." Someone who treats me like a person instead of a war machine. If that's betrayal, then yes, I'm guilty. The council erupted. Multiple chiefs shouting at once, demands for her removal, calls for circle combat. One warrior suggesting Rowan be executed immediately. Madraka let it continue for exactly 30 seconds. Then she stood. Anyone who wants to challenge me, do it. Circle. Now. One at a time, or all at once. I don't care. She looked around the room. But understand this. I'm not stepping down. I'm not ending this relationship. And I'm not apologizing for choosing someone who makes me better instead of someone who makes me traditional. No one moved. That's what I thought. She walked out. Rowan found her later, standing at the edge of the settlement looking out at the forest. That went well, he said. They'll vote me out within a week. Then we leave. Together. Find somewhere else. And abandon the clan to Krugo's leadership. He'll turn them into raiders within a month. More death. More war. Everything I've tried to prevent. So what do we do? I don't know. She was quiet for a long moment. Maybe nothing we do matters. Maybe the war will continue regardless of our choices. Maybe we're just two people trying to stop an avalanche with our bare hands. Maybe, but we're trying. Is trying enough? It has to be. They stood in silence, watching the sun set over enemy territory that had somehow become home. The vote came 3 days later. 8 war chiefs voted to remove her. 4 voted for her to stay. The elder abstained, which meant by tradition the decision fell to the warriors themselves. Democracy in an orc clan was loud, chaotic, and terrifying. Every warrior over combat age got a voice. Every voice was shouted at maximum volume. The debate lasted 6 hours. Arguments for removal. She's weak. She's compromised. She's choosing a human over her own kind. She's preventing necessary violence. She's dishonoring tradition. Arguments for keeping her. She's kept us alive through 3 winters. She's won every challenge. She's prevented meaningless deaths. She's brave enough to make unpopular choices. She's showing strength, not weakness. In the end, it came down to 1 vote. Krugo stood up. Everyone went silent. I hate that she's with a human, Krugo said. I think it's disgusting. I think it weakens us. I think it sends the wrong message. He paused. But she beat me in circle combat, and orc law says that means something, so I vote she stays. The room erupted again, but this time the decision was made. Madraka kept her position, by 1 vote, from the warrior who hated her most. Later that night, Rowan found Krugo alone. Why? He asked. Why what? Why vote for her to stay when you clearly want her gone? Krugo looked at him. Because she beat me. And I respect strength, even when I hate the choices that strength makes. He paused. Also, because removing a queen mid-spring means chaos. Chaos means vulnerability. Vulnerability means death. I'd rather have a queen I hate than no queen at all. That's surprisingly strategic. I'm not stupid. I'm just angry. Krugo turned to leave, then stopped. She's making a mistake with you. It'll cost her everything eventually. But until then, she's still my queen. And that means something. He walked away, leaving Rowan with the uncomfortable realization that enemies could respect you without liking you, and that sometimes that was enough. Summer came with heat that made the forest shimmer, and tensions that made everything else irrelevant. Human raids increased. Orc retaliations increased. The spiral of violence that Madraka had fought so hard to prevent accelerated anyway. And then Vhagar came back. This time, he didn't come under truce flag. This time he came with 200 soldiers, siege equipment, and orders from the king himself. Eliminate the orc threat permanently. The Blood Peak settlement had hours to prepare, maybe less. Madraka called council. We fight or we evacuate. Those are the options. We fight, Krugo said immediately. Other war chiefs agreed. We'll lose, Madraka countered. We have maybe 100 combat-ready warriors. They have twice that, plus ranged weapons and fortifications. This isn't a fight. It's a slaughter. Then it's a slaughter, but we don't run. Running isn't cowardice when the alternative is death. Running is always cowardice. Madraka looked ready to argue, but Rowan interrupted. What if I talk to them? He said. Everyone turned to stare. Vagar came for me once under peace terms. Maybe he'll listen again. They're here to kill us, Krugo said. They're not here to talk. Maybe not. But Vagar was my mentor. He offered me a pardon. Maybe he'll offer the same to the clan. Pardons don't exist for orcs. They didn't exist for exiled huntsmen either, but he offered anyway. Rowan looked at Madraka. Let me try. If it fails, you can fight. But at least try peace first. She studied him. You think you can negotiate with humans who've already decided we're monsters? No, but I think I can remind them we're people. That might be enough. It wasn't enough. Rowan walked out under white flag. Vagar met him halfway. Come to beg for your new friends? Vagar asked. Come to ask you not to do this. The king's orders are clear. The orc settlement is a threat. It gets eliminated. They're not a threat. Madraka has spent years preventing violence. She's stopped more raids than she's authorized. She's an orc queen who's turned you against your own kind. Vagar's voice was hard now. I offered you a way back. You refused. Now you'll face the consequences. The consequences being that you'll kill people who've done nothing wrong. They're orcs. They don't have to do anything wrong. They just have to exist. And there it was. The fundamental truth underneath all the politics and strategy and carefully worded justifications. Humans hated orcs, not for what they did, but for what they were. You used to be better than this, Rowan said, and you used to be loyal. Vagar turned away. You have 1 hour to evacuate civilians. After that, we attack. Rowan went back, delivered the news. Madraka made her decision immediately. Children and elders evacuate north. Warriors stay and delay. Delay for what? Krugo asked. For them to get far enough away that they survive. Will die. Yes, but they'll live. That's how sacrifice works. The evacuation was chaos. Families torn apart. Children crying. Warriors saying goodbye to people they'd never see again. Nell supervised medical preparations, talking to her herbs about how this was all very inconvenient and they'd better be cooperative or she'd be quite cross. Rakosh distributed weapons, making sure every warrior had what they needed. Dino, the merchant, helped load supplies while carefully not making eye contact with anyone. Rowan found Madraka in the longhouse. She was strapping on armor. Real armor this time, not the simple leather she wore for council. You don't have to do this, he said. Yes, I do. I'm queen. If my people die, I die with them. Then I'm staying too. No. Yes. Rowan, I'm with you. That means I'm with your people. I'm not running while they fight. You'll die. Probably. But I'll die for something that matters. She looked at him, then kissed him hard enough to bruise. I love you, she said. Which is inconvenient and impractical and the worst possible timing, but it's true. I love you too, Rowan said, which doesn't make any sense given the circumstances, but here we are. Here we are. They walked out together to face the attack. The battle was exactly as brutal as expected. 200 trained soldiers against 100 warriors. Orc strength versus human numbers. Rage versus discipline. The orcs held the line for 3 hours, longer than anyone expected, long enough for the evacuation to succeed, long enough for dozens of warriors to fall, long enough for Rowan to understand exactly what sacrifice looked like when you were standing in the middle of it. He fought alongside Krugo. The war chief, who'd hated him for months now, guarded his flank like a brother. When Rowan took an arrow meant for Krugo, the chief returned the favor by snapping the archer's neck. You fight well for prey, Krugo said. You die well for someone who hated me, Rowan countered. I still hate you, but you're brave. That counts. They kept fighting. Madraka was everywhere at once, directing warriors, reinforcing weak points, leading charges that broke enemy formations. She fought like someone with everything to lose and nothing left to prove. The sun was setting when Vagar found her. They faced each other across corpses and blood and the ruin of everything both had tried to prevent. Yield, Vagar said. This is over. It's not over until every warrior here is dead or everyone else is safe. They're safe already. You won. Your civilians escaped. Now yield before you lose everything else. Madraka looked around, counted the warriors still standing. 23 out of 100. The rest were dead or dying. She lowered her weapon. "We yield." "Smart choice." Vega turned to his soldiers. "Take the survivors prisoner. Secure the—" The arrow came from nowhere. Standard issue human bow. Perfect shot. It hit Vygar in the chest. He went down, and chaos erupted. Soldiers broke formation, some charged, others tried to protect their fallen captain. The fragile truce shattered instantly. Rowan saw who fired, one of Vega's own men, younger soldier, saw the hatred in his eyes, saw him reach for another arrow. Rowan put himself between the soldier and Madraka. The second arrow took him in the shoulder instead of her heart. He went down hard. Heard Madraka screaming his name, felt her dragging him behind cover, felt blood soaking through his shirt in concerning quantities. "Stay with me," she was saying. "Stay with me, stay with me, stay with me." "I'm here," he managed. "You're dying." "Maybe a little." "Don't joke, not now." The fighting continued around them. But Madraka ignored it, focusing entirely on keeping pressure on the wound, on keeping him conscious, on refusing to let him die in a battlefield surrounded by people who couldn't understand what they'd found together. Nell appeared, talking to herself as usual. "Yarrow's going to be very upset about this. I told him we might need extra blood-clotting agents, and did he grow faster? No, lazy plant." She worked on Rowan with professional efficiency while narrating to her herbs. Between her skill and Madraka's refusal to let him die, he survived the next hour. When the fighting finally ended, both sides too exhausted to continue, Vygar was alive, but barely. The soldier who'd shot him was dead, killed by his own comrades for breaking truce terms. And both armies faced each other across a battlefield. Neither had actually won. The treaty negotiations happened 3 days later. Vygar, recovering from his wound, met with Madraka, recovering from hers. They sat across from each other in the ruins of the Longhouse and made choices that would affect thousands. "This has to end," Vygar said. "Agreed. But I can't just retreat. The king wants—" "I don't care what the king wants. Your king wants glory. My warriors want revenge. Neither of them will get it." Madraka leaned forward. "Here's what happens. Your soldiers leave. We rebuild. Border stays where it is. No raids, no retaliations, just peace." "For how long?" "Until someone's stupid enough to break it." Vygar considered. "And what guarantee do I have that you won't attack the moment we turn our backs?" "The same guarantee I have that you won't. None. This is trust. Raw, stupid, irrational trust that maybe we're both tired enough of killing to try something different." "That's not much of a guarantee." "It's the only one I have." Vygar was quiet for a long time. Then, "The king will hate this. Your king can hate it from his throne. Meanwhile, his soldiers get to go home alive. That's a victory." "Is it?" "It's the only victory that matters." The treaty was signed. Unofficial, unrecognized. Just two leaders deciding that enough was enough and hoping everyone else would be too tired to argue. Rowan recovered slowly. Arrow wound turned out to be serious but not fatal. Nell spent 3 weeks forcing herbal remedies down his throat while complaining to Basil about patient compliance. Madraka stayed with him, every day, every night, being there in ways that had nothing to do with nursing and everything to do with refusing to let go of someone she'd found, against all probability. "We're alive," Rowan said one evening. "Doesn't seem real." "Nothing about this seems real," Madraka agreed. "We're enemies who fell in love. We're survivors of a battle that should have killed us. We're living in a peace that shouldn't exist." She was quiet. "But here we are. Here we are." The settlement rebuilt. Slowly, painfully, but it rebuilt. The evacuated families returned, children who'd lost parents. Warriors who'd lost friends, a community that had survived but bore the cost of survival. Krugo survived, lost his left hand in the fighting but refused to treat it as a defeat. "Still have one hand," he told anyone who asked. "One hand's enough to hold a weapon. That's all a warrior needs." He was elected war chief again, immediately used his position to enforce the treaty. "Any warrior who breaks peace terms answers to me personally," he announced. And I'm significantly meaner now that I'm bitter about the hand situation. Vrokosh expanded his collection, added a button from a fallen soldier, human and orc. They both chose these buttons, he explained to Rowan. Both sewed them on themselves. Both cared about small things even while preparing for big things. That's worth remembering. Nell's herbs survived winter and were, in her words, being insufferable about it. The peace held, not because everyone agreed with it, but because everyone was too exhausted to break it. Months passed, then a year. Rowan and Madraka stood together at the edge of the settlement, looking out at the forest below. The same view they'd shared a year ago when everything was falling apart. Now everything was tentatively, carefully, not falling apart. "Do you regret it?" Rowan asked. "Everything that happened? Do you?" "I asked first." She smiled slightly. "I regret the deaths. I regret the violence. I regret that so many people had to die for something we could have just talked out." She paused. "But I don't regret you. Not for a second. Even though I've made your life harder. Especially because of that. Anyone can make life easier by avoiding complications. You made life harder by mattering." She looked at him. "That's worth the cost. You matter too. I know. We both matter. To each other. To people who thought mattering was weakness." She was quiet. "Maybe that's how change happens. Not through big declarations or perfect plans. Just through small choices, to see enemies as people, to choose connection over hatred, to survive not by fighting harder but by learning when to stop fighting. That's very philosophical." "I'm a queen. I'm allowed to be philosophical occasionally." They stood in silence, watching the sunset paint the forest in gold and red. The peace wouldn't last forever. Rowan knew that. Someday, someone would break it. Someday, the cycle would start again. But maybe it would last a little longer this time. Maybe the next generation would remember that peace was possible because two people had been stupid enough to try it. Maybe hope was irrational. But so was everything else they'd done. Rowan reached for Madraka's hand. She took it, and they stood together. Two enemies who'd accidentally become allies, become friends, become something the world didn't have a word for yet. The forest stretched out before them, vast and indifferent and beautiful. "What happens now?" Rowan asked. "Now we keep surviving," Madraka said. "Together. Despite the world, despite the odds, despite every reason this shouldn't work. That's not much of a plan. It's the only one we have." In the distance, an orc child laughed. A human merchant set up shop at the border crossing. Vrokosh showed his button collection to a visiting warrior. Nell lectured Basil about growth rates. Small moments, small acts of survival. Small evidence that enemies could become something else if given time, proximity, and the courage to try. Rowan pulled out a dried moon petal, the flower that had almost killed him and had ultimately saved him. It was brittle now, silver-white faded to grey, but it was still whole. "I kept this," he said. "Reminder that dangerous things can save you if you're willing to survive them." Madraka took it carefully. "Some of my warriors still think you poisoned yourself deliberately to trick me into saving you." "Did I?" "No, you were just stupid and desperate. Love that for me." She laughed. The sound was rare enough that Rowan treasured it. "You know what's funny? That night in the cabin, when I held you while you were dying, I told myself it didn't mean anything. That I was just being practical. That body heat was survival strategy, nothing more. And now I realize that every choice I've made since then has been about not losing that feeling, of mattering to someone who doesn't want anything from me except to keep existing together. That's all I want too. I know." She kissed him gently. "That's why this works." They stayed there until the sun disappeared entirely and the stars came out. The world was still broken. The war was still happening somewhere. People were still dying for causes they barely understood. But in this settlement, at this moment, two people who shouldn't exist together had built something impossible. They'd built a future that included both of them. And maybe that was enough. Maybe small acts of impossible love were how the world actually changed. Maybe hope wasn't irrational after all. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us that the bravest warriors aren't those who never feel fear. They're the ones who choose love despite it. who choose connection over hatred, who choose survival not by fighting harder, but by learning when to stop fighting. In the end, the world didn't need perfect heroes. It needed broken people willing to fix each other. This has been an Orc-Bound Tales story. Subscribe for more fantasy stories that challenge what enemies mean. Hit the bell for notifications. And leave a comment telling us what you thought about Rowan and Madraka's impossible journey. Blood makes you orc. Loyalty makes you family. Until next time, remember, some victories aren't won on battlefields, but in the quiet moments when we choose others over ourselves.